Now everyone feels better if they've got technical challenges in their talk. They're like, oh, well, it happened to Sam already, so it's not so bad. Andreas already did this a bit, but I would just like to take back to sort of remember this is the sixth StripeCon. We started in Austria in 2014, and these were, the people that were there. 2015, again, that was one that I was lucky enough to be part of. Ljubljana didn't have a nice class photo, but good times were had there. In Malta, Ingo represented the New Zealand team. Robbie was there in the Netherlands. And so I'm really pleased to be back, first time in 3 years at StripeCon. It's an event that's close to my heart and really, really great to spend a few days with a lovely bunch of people. So today I think I'll talk a little bit about the recent past of Silverstripe CMS and the near future. Well, obviously the future is more speculative than the past. In particular, I'd like to talk about Silverstripe CMS 4, do a bit of a retrospective on that, talk about what the future of Silverstripe CMS might be, what's been happening at Silverstripe, the little old company I work for in New Zealand, and how Silverstripe and the Silverstripe CMS project work together. And finally, just as by way of a bit of information, just share some small branding changes with you. So I hope to take about 40 minutes for the talk and then have lots of time for questions, because I think that's usually quite good. So yeah, if you give me the call at 9:40, yeah, thanks. Cool. So kicking in, Silverstripe CMS 4, a retrospective. There was a lot that was good, I think, about Silverstripe CMS 4, and one of the first things was it has been a reasonably quick uptake. It's really hard to know exactly how fast things are, but based on what we can see, the uptake of CMS 4 was faster than Drupal 7 to Drupal 8. Drupal is a project that we think shares a lot of similarities with CMS, and so we do kind of look to it to say, okay, how's things going there? What can we learn from that? And we found that the upgrade to 4 was reasonably fast. It still has taken some time. It's still a big project, but the upgrade of modules supporting version 4 and the like has been pretty quick. The upgrader tools. So this was a bit of a bet that we made to say, if we use static analysis and build some tools, we can make the process of upgrading code where every single class has been renamed and the like a little bit easier. I think that upgrading to 4 would have been a heck of a lot harder without those tools, and in that, I think those tools have been a success. It was definitely the right decision to make. I think we can certainly go further, and I think the ecosystem of static analysis tools in PHP has gotten a lot better over the last few years. So when we go, say, from 4 to 5, I think we can go even deeper with some of those tools. GraphQL was quite an early stage technology at the time we were deciding how should we build version 4, and it seems like it's a good bet. Like the ecosystem around GraphQL has been growing, the number of projects that have also been adopting has been growing, and so having Silverstripe CMS with a version of GraphQL in there in the core, I think it has been quite helpful. Not to say we didn't have to overcome some fairly major challenges, being frankly an early adopter of this technology and hitting a lot of problems for the first time. But I think we've got a real asset in there in having GraphQL in the system. The increased use of third-party APIs, the reduced dependency on our own thing. Shout out to Dan Hensby for SwiftMailer. It's been, people have given feedback that this has made it a lot easier to use Silverstripe in a broader variety of situations because they can rely on the ability to connect, for instance, SwiftMailer to all the different mail ecosystem that it supports. And of course, most importantly of all, we've got the Better Buttons module in core, which is great. There were things that were not so good. In spite of the upgrader tools, upgrades were really hard. We've had a lot of feedback that moving from 3 to 4 is quite a big project, both from development teams and from customers. Our personal experience upgrading significant projects, we've had projects that took a lot longer than we anticipated, and that's always difficult. Asset migration in particular was really difficult, especially I think we had 200 gigabytes of assets in one site, and that was really difficult. So these were lessons that we learned. Yeah, I can see someone a little bit surprised at that number of assets. It is the biggest site that we have by quite a margin, but it's always the most difficult projects that you remember, is right. We did wind up having important issues not being fixed until 4.1 or 4.2. There were still people who got, say, 4.0 and realized I have to upgrade to 4.1 because my site's not really doing what I need until new features or fixes in those versions were. And that's always disappointing. Versioning of content blocks, in particular, was something that was really hard. So particularly if you want to look at the full version history of a complex relationship of your pages and your blocks. This has just been something we've been working on 4.3 and 4.4. We'll probably work on it some more in 4.5. It's a bit of a lesson that the content model that we had for storing all those blocks is perhaps not ideal. It's something we might want to look at in version 5. For version 4, we're sort of like we are where we are. And the other thing was we made a lot of big technical changes, notably on the front end. We used React for new pieces of the CMS, powered by that content API with GraphQL. But only half the CMS does that. There's two quite different paradigms sitting inside Silverstripe 4. And if you're heavily extending the CMS or debugging issues in it or building new features, this can be a real source of friction and slow people down. There were a few other lessons that it's going to take people 2 to 3 years to get around to upgrading. The new version won't come out and people say, yeah, within the first 6 months, we'll get everybody there. People take time, especially if it's an expensive project. People might wait till the next major redesign. People might wait till the next year's budgeting round, etc. So there's a lot of time there. And when people do make major investments, they expect to be able to get the return on that investment over 3 to 5 years. So this really paints a picture that these massive upgrades and changes are not something that we can do very frequently. And so some of our conclusions about this are, we don't want to be ending support for version 4 anytime soon. End of 2022 is kind of like the numbers where we're currently looking at, although frankly it depends a bit on when version 5 would come out. And the other lesson is that version 5 can't be as big and painful an upgrade as 3 to 4 was. There needs to be a smoother path. Yes, we might want to make some breaking changes, remove some legacy code, but it can't be, another, in some cases almost sort of comparable to a redevelopment project. So we want to make a smooth path to upgrade for CMS 5, or possibly just keep supporting version 4 for an even longer time to avoid people needing to upgrade. Because the challenge by saying we want to keep upgrades smooth is, does that stop you from making the changes that you would need to keep the project relevant? Or do we say version 5 is a smooth upgrade, but maybe version 6 would be more? And so something that we've been thinking about is it reasonable to expect people to do substantial upgrades without a slight rebuild? And I'll have a few of these questions throughout my talk that I don't have the answers to yet, but I'm putting them back to you that either over the next couple of days or in discussion online, we can pick up these topics and really think, what do we want to do? Because they really do shape the direction of the project. A lesson from a product called Basecamp by 37 Signals, the inventors of Ruby on Rails, who I'm sure many of us have heard of. When they created Basecamp 2, they basically said, look, we've made changes. We think that for new customers, this is going to be better, and we think that the good outweighs the bad quite substantially. But some of you like the old system. Rather than trying to keep all those people happy by diluting Basecamp 2, we're just going to let people use Basecamp 1 for as long as they like. And they never have to migrate. They can migrate when they're ready. And we'll keep it running until the last person leaves that particular boat. With Silverstripe 4, we took the attitude that we want people to come on and upgrade. We want to end support for Silverstripe 3. We want to get people off that ship and onto the new one so everyone's using the latest and greatest. And what we found was that people were slower in doing this than we would have liked. What we found was that push comes to shove, the reasons we couldn't keep supporting Silverstripe 3, we could actually solve if we tried hard enough. And as a consequence, with version 3.6 and 3.7, we've been able to keep Silverstripe 3 running for longer, and we'll be supporting it for another year or two yet. So this sort of attitude of like, do you actually need to have people upgrade, or is it better to keep the old versions running and focus those new sites on people who are either building new sites or doing major redevelopments? The third conclusion, which isn't really directly related to that good and bad, is keep reducing the maintenance surface. We're not a huge team. We've got about 7 people at Silverstripe, supporting about 120 modules, which I'll come to later. And then there's the community contributions as well. But collectively, the level of effort we have it's a lot of code that we currently have supported by that group. And having less code to maintain would be good. And really looking at like where are pieces where Silverstripe really excels in this area versus what is something where we've got our own version of that code, lots of other people do. Ours isn't really any better, it's just our one. And focus Silverstripe on its point of difference. But what is that point of difference? And how do we make sure that we don't lose that as we go forward? So that's really what I think we want to look at when we look at the future of Silverstripe. Silverstripe's a 14-year-old project. That's pretty old for a web project. The web was very different in 2005 when the first line of code was put into the CVS repository that Silverstripe sat in. Where do we want it to go for the next years? We've got a really enthusiastic community. I think that this event is really a testament to that. A lot of people who love Silverstripe. And I do think we need to double down on Silverstripe's strengths in 2019. I think the core strengths of Silverstripe are developer flexibility and that it's intuitive for authors. And there's a couple of ways of interpreting this. You can think of it as an intuitive UI to wrap around your project's data model. That the thing about Silverstripe CMS is that you can create whatever data model you like in the ORM and very easily wrap the CMS around to provide a nice interface on that with versioning and draft publish and what permission control and whatever else you need quite quickly. The other view of that comment is that it's an application framework for building whatever site or app you can think of. And this is certainly what people like about Silverstripe CMS, is that they say, I can build very sophisticated applications for my customers. But when we think about these two benefits, and we look at like the state of the web in 2019, my view, and you could challenge me, is that this first benefit is really what sets Silverstripe CMS apart. There are lots of tools out there for building application frameworks, but that it is the ability to have a CMS for whatever data model you like that not as many other tools can offer. And so the most central pieces to that are the ORM, the admin area, and parts of the form system. And when we look at like the future of Silverstripe and say, what do we do? Investing most into these areas, I think, will provide the best point of difference, the product that best fits alongside all the tools you use. And implicit in this is this idea that the classic MVC stack, Silverstripe controllers, Silverstripe views, is only one possible way you can build sites with Silverstripe CMS. In the last few years, we've talked a lot about headless or about decoupled CMS and about content APIs, which is the feature of a CMS that lets you do these things. So, what we've focused on with the GraphQL code and other things is to provide a really good content API for Silverstripe CMS. And what we're looking to work on in that is to stabilize the GraphQL API, make sure it's got the performance and features that you need to actually deliver applications with this, make smoother entry points for newcomers, tutorials, starter kits to integrate with other libraries and so on. And one of the things that we're pondering here is what is the future of our controller and view system? Is it something that works well as is and we keep it going in more or less the same thing it is? Is it something we should double down and keep improving and make it really, really great? Or is it something that we can say, look, other tools have actually got better options in this. Let's make Silverstripe work nicely with some of those and keep the controller view around as something that's available, but perhaps not recommend it so much for new projects. And I think there's a spectrum of views on this. For some people, it works really, really well. For some people, it's like, it's okay, but there are better tools. And for others, their minds have moved elsewhere. And I guess the breadth of views in the Silverstripe ecosystem is a consequence of its flexibility and our imaginations. But it also means that these decisions are not easy to make, shouldn't be made lightly. But that is definitely something that we're asking ourselves. Elemental is a content block module that we sort of put on the stage and said we're going to support this project started by a company in New Zealand called DNA Design. And it's been great. The last couple of years we've put a lot of effort into it. The feedback that I've had anecdotally is that it's working for people, and certainly working a lot better for people in 2019 than it was in 2017. There is this question though, if the point of Silverstripe is that it wraps itself around whatever data model you provide it, why do you have this big, thick, fixed data model that you've got in this content block system? Isn't it better just to let developers design the data model that suits their site? And so again, there's these two points of view. Blocks are a trade-off between author flexibility and designer and developer integrity. People need a certain level of control of their sites. Even if they don't know the details, the owner or author of the sites want to be able to assemble and reassemble things in a more flexible way than pages provide. And then on the other side, it's better to let developers build the right data model for the site. I think the fact that almost everyone I've ever spoken to in the Silverstripe community has built their own blocks module is a sign that this is something that just did need to be part of the core. And because of that, for the last couple of years, we've been improving Elemental, and we'll continue to do so. And we think that this is a really fundamental part of the CMS. This would be a bit of a bigger one, though. Can blocks replace page types as the default way to customize a site? If you're creating a module that adds some functionality for a site, rather than having that module supply a page type, a subclass of page without a namespace, instead, would it be better to say we've supplied a block? We already have this difficulty in modules of like saying which class you're supposed to extend, and it is a little bit of a difficult structure. But more than that, when you create a module that provides a page type, there's a huge number of assumptions about how page types work on that site that may or may not be true. So encouraging people to say, well, instead of page types, provide elemental blocks might be better. But again, there's a lot of different ways Silverstripe's being used, and we really need to say, what options are we shutting down if we do take that approach? So one of the things that we're going to be looking on back in New Zealand is how we can get more modules that provide extra elemental blocks and growing that ecosystem. The React CMS, and we've just got to finish the bastard off. It's half finished. And page admin and model admin are probably the two major areas. Model admin, a lot of the focus on that's really kind of around this idea of what's a React grid field look like. And with page admin, there's this idea to say, well, Elemental is quite a different way of looking at sites. If you optimize a user experience for that, would it be better to sort of just assume that Elemental's there rather than having to create a user experience without Elemental and then somehow shoehorn Elemental into that? Okay, I have no idea what that said. Now we know why security alerts are a really weak way of trying to secure systems. And one of the other things, I guess, with this is how much customization via PHP is expected in this model. With React basically pushing a lot more of your application to the front end, there are strong arguments to say, well, expecting everything to be customized via PHP is not, it creates the sort of worst of both experiences. It's better to say, look, this is a JavaScript application. If you want to customize it, use JavaScript. But one of the benefits of Silverstripe is that you can really you can flesh out a CMS very rapidly to wrap itself around a data model. Having to jump between PHP and JavaScript to do that would be bad. My view on this is that probably, like, if you're trying to create new controls or tailor the detailed user interaction of controls, you're probably going to be jumping into JavaScript. But if you're just wanting to assemble modules and controls that other people have created, you should be able to do that from the server. But that's a very high level, slightly hand-wavy view. The code gets a lot more complicated. And the other part of this is, if we are pushing this, is this going to be another painful upgrade for sites? If they've done a lot of customization of the pages area and we move to a React one, is that like, I'll throw that all away and start again? Which was exactly what we said we should try and avoid doing with Silverstripe 5. So some tough calls to make there. On a more meta level, one of the things that Ingo's been looking at a lot is our release process, making it easier to produce new releases, making sure that they're of good quality, that we have more automated testing, that we have better support for manual testing in there, improve the security auditing process. So what we currently have as a thing for the New Zealand government is a quarterly security audit of the changes to Silverstripe and a number of the core modules. This is going to be something that next year we're likely to take over more on our own, but we do think it's a valuable thing to have something with an audited seal of approval for those customers that want it, to say, yes, there's been an external review, a bit of a pen test of this code, and you can wait until that happens before putting it on your sites. And I think core to releases and quality is just getting more steps into your continuous integration pipeline, more things that happen automatically whenever changes are made, so that when you don't need to wait for the quality to be added in at the end of a release or some kind of step. Security, speaking of which, is a big focus for us. We are looking at how we can build security steps in earlier, static analysis, dynamic analysis, with a specific focus on security and a specific focus on automation that we can bake into CI. Vulnerability management, so that when PHP or JavaScript dependencies have known vulnerabilities, that can be flagged and addressed as quickly as possible. And the other thing that we're doing is we are getting ISO, at Silverstripe, we're getting ISO 27001 certification, which is a information security certification. The focus of this is with our commercial products, but a lot of that will basically have flow-on benefits to Silverstripe CMS, because that's the open source core on which all our commercial products are based. So we're going to be looking, and often customers will ask questions about security. This is an area that we are looking at improving things. Less on the content, although I fully acknowledge that that's a good thing to look at, is just the way developer docs are maintained is awkward. There's this hand-rolled docs site thing based on Silverstripe called Docs Viewer. It's a big wheel reinvention that no one particularly wants to maintain. Yeah, you've heard that before, haven't you? So we're looking to shift to something new, like an off-the-shelf tool. The most interesting thing recently that's come up was that Aaron Carlino, aka Uncle Cheese, did a demo based on Gatsby, which is a React-based static site generator, and to basically take the markdown content, push it through Gatsby and create a Gatsby site. Gatsby's also been something that people have been looking at a lot for headless CMS implementations. So you take Silverstripe, you take its GraphQL API, you push that into a Gatsby site, and you render that and host it on a service like Netlify. So yeah, interesting new architectures based on Silverstripe there. And he's tried them out on our docs. But we're still kind of looking at options. At the end of the talk, I've got some links, which will be in the stuff that gets sent out, so you can participate in the discussions too. So that's a little bit of the sort of threads that we've been looking at for Silverstripe CMS and what we're wanting to focus on over the next wee while. I'd also like to share a little bit about what's been happening at Silverstripe, the company. So we've been thinking about like who we are and what we're about, and this is how we're thinking about who Silverstripe are. We're a design and technology company, and we make complex things simple. This is just a simple framing of who we think we are. And one of the things that isn't in here is we're moving away from thinking of ourselves as a CMS company. We're hugely committed to Silverstripe CMS. It's the basis of almost all our work, and we really want to keep it succeeding, keep the community growing. But it's not so much the reason that the company exists as a tool that helps us succeed. What we like to do is help our clients solve tricky problems using digital. We see the CMS as being a tool that helps us succeed. It's helped us succeed for a long time. We want to keep it being a tool that does that. And I think in doing that, it helps us all succeed because to a large extent, we do have the same kind of problems that we're solving for our customers. Another thing that's been happening at Silverstripe, we've had a thing called the Common Web Platform, which you've probably all heard of. It was a government contract from 2013 till 2020. Now, 2020 is next year, so there's actually less than 12 months on the clock for this contract. It ends September 2020. It's going to be replaced by different contracts in New Zealand. But this was great because it was a big injection of investment and uptake, especially in New Zealand, into CMS. We had a lot of digital agencies in New Zealand pick it up. We had a lot of government customers using it. We had basically the level of energy and attention on Silverstripe CMS increase. But it also probably narrowed our focus, especially at home base, to serving the needs of that group. And so in some case, to some extent, it was a bit of a distortion. So it's been a great 7 years. I'm looking forward to the next 7. This will be a sort of a chance to get a new lease on life with Silverstripe CMS, and so bring on the future. And I guess that ties to what is the relationship between Silverstripe, the company, and Silverstripe CMS, the open source project. So our default position is that we want to work in the open. We've been open source since 2005 because we saw that the benefits of sharing things was better than the benefits of holding them all back. Our focus is really on our core audience, but Silverstripe CMS is so flexible that it's a foundation that we can see a lot of contributions to extend it for other areas. So what is our core audience? We typically work with larger organizations. 250 or more staff is a typical benchmark, but there are still quite a few at that 100 to 250 size. We do build both the large and small sites of these organizations so that they can kind of standardize on a platform, which means that Silverstripe's not just for building big sites. It's for building big and small sites for slightly bigger customers. And public sector remains important to us. We do a huge amount of work in that space. That's about 60% of our work. And so we do want to kind of make sure we keep looking after that audience. For that audience, non-functional requirements are key: security, accessibility, content integrity. But it also needs to be a system that you can pull a site together quickly, while at the same time being able to scale it up to build more sophisticated apps with lots of integrations. It's not a small challenge that we take on with that, but it is an area where that Silverstripe works really well. Silverstripe has played well in this space for a long time, and we hope we'll continue to do so. So if you're looking for building sites for those slightly larger organizations, that's awesome. Like, we're going to be making sure that Silverstripe meets those needs, and that if you're currently working with slightly smaller organizations and looking to take the next step up, that Silverstripe will kind of be there waiting for you with the features you need to serve the needs of that group. But if that use case doesn't quite match your projects, we really see this as being a great option for saying, introduce modules and extensions and then pull requests and the like that better suit Silverstripe for other use cases. We've got 2,500 modules on there. I look forward to seeing the next 2,500. This has been, I remember we saw people that said, I don't really like pages and page types. It's too much complexity for my users. I'm going to strip that all back and just use a few model admins to really just give people edit rights to only those pieces of the content that they need. We never even thought that this, why would anyone do that? But it was clearly an important use case for this group. It was Stevie Mayhew from Little Giant at the time. It was a great example of just how much you can use Silverstripe as a starting point and push it in. And so we look forward to seeing more of that kind of innovation and broadening of the use case of Silverstripe. And I guess that relates a little bit to what we're supporting. is we had this supported modules concept, which in some ways was good. Hey, there's modules where it's like, hey, we put a stamp of approval on that. This came out of CWP to a large extent, and I guess what our conclusion is that it probably won't make a lot of sense beyond CWP. We ended up with 120 modules being maintained by 7 people on top of the core, including the core as well. And so this idea of saying, look, we're going to have a whole bunch of commitments, that promises that we make about these modules that maybe we can keep or maybe that we can't quite manage to, we're going to be transparent about our efforts. And this comes with that idea of working in the open. So one of the things we're going to be working on is Silverstripe Essentials, which is our sort of successor to CWP in some ways. It's a bundle of modules configured for Silverstripe Cloud and supported by our ops team. Those modules should work nicely together. There'll be the security audits replacing the CWP one. Its foundation will be the open source modules, many of which we're already using. It will probably be smaller than the CWP recipe. There's a lot of junk in that collection of modules that we'd be looking to remove from the thing that we really double down and support. It'll include some of those really critical ones like user forms and Elemental, but it probably won't be as broad as the CWP recipe. For everything else, we're going to, probably like you, have teams that support our client projects, and if there are modules on there that have been used to build those projects, they will support them. Modules that we use widely across our projects are likely to get more of our attention, fixes and improvements. Modules that are used occasionally might get a bit, but not so much. And modules that we haven't used anywhere, well, probably won't get any attention. So one of the things that we've sort of been kicking back is we could kind of say, look, these are the modules we use a lot. These are the modules we use a little bit to give that support information. But that's quite one-dimensional, and really everyone's got information about, well, do you use these modules a lot, and do you use them a little bit? And if you do use these modules a lot, are you doing bug fixes for them, and the like? And so another one of these questions to ponder is like, what is the most useful information to share about modules across the community? How should we give people a sense of like, which modules, if I pick them up, can I know have got some decent backing and from who? So yeah, really interested to see what would make sense to people, what would be of most value. But our core principle of this is not so much to create a list of promises that maybe are sustainable, maybe not, but instead to say, let's be transparent about what we're doing, because I think that is a much more effective decision-making tool. Like that is a lot more honest and hopefully more valuable. So with support with a capital S, a lot of that will just be like, if you want support, there's a support contract. That might also be something we look at to say if people really want version 3 or 4 or 4 point whatever supported for a longer time or extended to get onto a new version of PHP. That might be an area we say, sure, if you want that, it's going to take this much effort, so this is what we'll charge you for that. And to paraphrase the old adage, making it more all you can eat for as much as it costs. We're not sure how much value that's going to be. This is really quite an early stage idea. So if you're interested in those kind of areas, happy to chat. So the final thing I was going to talk about before getting into Q&A was just some small branding changes. You might have noticed a little bit of a change in the way I've been talking about some things. What the heck is CMS 4? Like usually we've been saying SS4 with these things. And the problem is that you think the word Silverstripe. Is it a software company headquartered in New Zealand or an open source CMS project? And the answer is today it's kind of been both. That's quite confusing. And easy, just change the name of one of them. Well, it's like changing the name of either one of those would be really damaging for that thing. So we don't really want to do either of those. And so instead, we want to double down on this differentiation that Silverstripe is a software company headquartered in New Zealand, and Silverstripe CMS is an open source CMS project, which comes with a framework. So this is another piece of this, just saying Silverstripe CMS and Silverstripe framework. Outside of the Silverstripe CMS community, Silverstripe framework is of limited relevance. And so thinking of it saying, yes, that is part of Silverstripe CMS, it includes a framework. A framework is one of its features, like a lot of other things. And at a really detailed level, you can say, oh, well, these composer packages can be assembled. But that's, that's a detail that's only of relevance of the people who are actually running the composer command. At that high level, when you think of naming and the like, we can just call the thing Silverstripe CMS, or CMS for short. The other thing you might notice there is don't you mean capital S in the middle? We've worked really hard to kind of get everyone using that. We're looking to drop that and just use a normal word. The capital S in the middle was quite confusing for a lot of people. It's very techy. It made things look like Silverstripe was about grey lines, whereas the word originated from a breed of bamboo, so it didn't really kind of have a lot of connection to its original thing, and it's just I guess unnecessarily sort of complicated and a bit artificial. I am keeping the E with an acute in my name though, so that's not going anywhere. And part of this, we're looking to say, let's make the standard domain name silverstripecms.org. I think one of the other things that this will do is also clarify the separation between silverstripe.com and silverstripecms.org, which has been a bit of a moving target over the last few years, but to really say this is the home of the open source project and the community behind it. This other one's about a company. Obviously, everything would be set up with redirectors, so nothing would break, but looking at making that the standard domain name. So, to wrap up, the web's getting bigger and more complicated. Rather than Silverstripe CMS being the thing on which your entire projects are built, we see Silverstripe being a part of that, and that more and more you're bringing in other tools and other technologies to solve problems for your clients. And similarly, rather than Silverstripe being the only party that drives the future of this open source project, we really want to sort of double down and say, hey, look, let's do this more together. We'll be a key part of that, but we're looking to work with others on that as well. So, let's collaborate. It's the open source way. Thank you. And so I think it might be time good to do some questions. Do we want to do a hand around mic?
And anyone has a question? No one? Yes. Okay.
Hi, Sam. I'm just wondering, with the change in the community URLs and domains, are there plans for any reworking of the existing developer directory, the community, those parts of the community?
Yeah. So that would probably be an area where I think it would be great to look into, and there were some sort of bigger ideas about the idea of potentially doing like European-specific versions of those as well from some people. I think it would be really great to look into that, and that would probably be an area where pushing it into more of an open source project would be good, and then potentially getting contributions from more broadly. We're very supportive of those ideas. We don't have a heck of a lot of spare time to be able to do it all down in Wellington, but we'd be really keen to kind of, I guess, open up the doors to do that as more of a joint community-based project.
Any other questions, Anthony? No?
Or sort of comments, discussion?
Yeah. We have 2 microphones, so...
If there are no questions,
yes.
Thank you, Sam.
Oh, there we go. We've got one on the back.
One more?
Sure.
So just a question about the roadmap for Silverstripe 4. I got a couple of clients willing to upgrade to 4 finally, but they are asking what will be the long-term support date for Silverstripe 4.
So it's at least the end of 2022. That's what we're looking at. We haven't yet figured out whether we'd do it a lot longer than that. It's a little difficult to plan more than 3 years in the future. What we've found with Silverstripe 3 was that there was about a 3-year overlap between the release of version 4 and the end of that. I would expect that probably we'd look at that. Like, frankly, the way I think it's probably going to go is that we'll keep a running window of about 3 years in the future, and so we might look at sort of continuing to push it out. It's very difficult to make commitments about an event 5 years in the future now. But for example, we're currently looking at like what upgrading Symphony 4 within upgrading from Symphony 3 to Symphony 4 within Silverstripe 4 would look like, to make sure that we can keep, not extend beyond the end of life of some of the dependent projects. So, yeah, it might be longer than the end of 2022, which is, I guess, 3 and a bit years from now. Yeah.
Thank you.
Behind you. So this is just a curiosity. You said that the Common Web Platform in New Zealand is shutting down 2020. So does that mean all the sites and stuff that's built on it has to migrate?
Basically, it's moving towards, the government had a strategy of like choose one provider and kind of back that one horse, and luckily that was us. They're moving towards more of an open space where there'll be will be one of a number of providers. So we'll be having all those sites continue running, but there'll probably be other people providing that. And because of that, the level of engagement that the government has with us on the development of the platform will be less. We'll be doing that more ourselves and less in collaboration with them. Like we had as part of the original contract, sort of funding that paid for a development team to keep working on it, on the features that audience would like. That part of the contract's going away. So we'll still be running government websites, but there'll be less of our team's efforts being directed solely to that audience.
One word, Dan?
2 questions. When are we going to change the database driver engine?
Oh, yeah.
Scrap our one. And 2, with your previous answer, what does that mean for a dedicated open source team at Silverstripe?
Yeah, so we still have a dedicated open source team at Silverstripe. We're going to just sort of shoulder the burden of that ourselves a little bit more, but that's not going anywhere. And hopefully the number of modules that it's kind of on the hook for supporting is going to reduce a bit. Not so much because the level of energy is going down, but just it's been really difficult to keep across all that lately, and so I guess the level of energy we put into that's lower than we'd like. So we'd like to put the same amount of energy into a smaller group to increase the outcomes. Database abstraction, I mean, I know that's a pet project of yours. So if you want to get that one over the line, let's do it for Silverstripe 5. I don't think that's the kind of thing that would cause massive upgrade friction. It would probably be the kind of thing that you would want to embargo for a Silverstripe 5. It's really going to come down to whether or not Dan Hensby drives that, mate. Patch is welcome. I mean, to be honest, my personal view was that piece of code was not a huge time sink in terms of maintenance effort. I think that the sort of the controller and view system is probably an area where perhaps other projects are doing more, and especially if you move into something like a headless architecture. I mean, if you want to pick that torch up again, I'd be happy to support that.
Okay.
Do you know if there are any plans to do a full cache abstraction? Because the documentation says that the core caches cannot be edited, and this is causing us problems if you have a multi-instance approach or if you're working with multiple Docker containers.
That's probably, I don't know the answer to that specifically now. I guess what I could say now is how you could go about getting that over the line. What I would probably recommend is that either on the discussion forums, if it's a bit more of a broad discussion, so forum.silverstripe.org. I'll go back to that one. We've got some links here. I put these here mostly so that when we send out the slide deck, the links will be available, so you don't have to write those down. The feature ideas forum is also a good place to discuss speculative hand-wavy ideas about the future of Silverstripe. So if you've got something where you're like, hey, I think we could be better than this here, I'm not really sure of what that might look like, go on the feature ideas forum, post a comment about that, and I'd invite you to do that. If it's more specific and you've thought about, look, this is a specific technical solution that I'd like feedback on, then a GitHub issue makes a lot of sense. Something that's more kind of, I guess, actionable. Yeah, I mean, certainly we'd be looking to sort of understand how we can make those things more flexible. If we can do them in a non-breaking way, then that might be something we can do in 4. Otherwise, it might be something we look to do in 5. But certainly, I'm sure we can find a solution to that.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Hello. So if I understood you correctly, Silverstripe 3 roadmap to end of support is unchanged. So if there is any need for longer term support, it would be about the support contract idea that you've presented.
Yeah, I think we're looking. That's always the thing, you're on stage. Anything you say is a promise, right? I believe that the plan is June 2021 is to continue support of Silverstripe 3 until then. To basically push it out from September 2020, which was the previous communicated date. At that point, that'd be the end. What we're looking to say is, look, if someone really wants to keep us supporting Silverstripe 3 beyond that, we are open to saying, if you want to pay, we could kind of figure out how much it costs and how many people are interested in this and come up with sort of a commercial thing for that. Our assumption is basically based on the idea that this would be of most value to bigger customers. And so the idea of saying, well, to pay to keep our system getting maintained is probably okay. Yeah, so that would be the kind of area. And I guess there's that thing where you can say, well, if someone keeps paying, do you keep supporting it forever? Potentially. And it's like, well, you might hit hard limits. You might get to the point where the cost of continuing to support that becomes so high that you're maintaining your old version, you're maintaining a forked version of Apache to keep the system running or what have you. And then it just gets a bit silly. It becomes cheaper to put it on the line. But I guess historically we've taken the sort of attitude of saying, well, how much can we afford to do for free? And then it's a lot of hand-wringing and umming and ahhing. And then it's like, well, look, if people really, really want this, we can say, well, then help make it happen. I mean, that's to a large extent what the New Zealand government did with a lot of the CWP contract. So we're just saying, let's look into that. But yeah, I mean, at this stage, probably happy to hear feedback on what would or wouldn't be valuable in those kind of agreements. So it's a bit of an idea for discussion rather than a strong like a product pack at the moment.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of small customers where an upgrade is an expensive investment, so it's also valuable for I guess for smaller clients as well. Thank you.
With the focus being more on large scale or bigger customer sites, can you tell us what you expect on feature sets, like in this core or something that would change? Like if Dan is not going to ship a database abstraction, is making a setup where you can have read-only database servers or something you guys have on your roadmap?
Right. So probably if you look at like the kind of impact it's had with the sort of Silverstripe 4 work, we spent a lot of time on making sure versioning worked across things, notably things like content blocks and then assets. And the asset system is kind of complicated because we didn't want to inadvertently have stuff people upload become public content without being really, really obvious about that. Some people don't care. I don't think WordPress even has draft content. It's just kind of got a checkbox. And so for simpler sites, the level of integrity we've got there and the complexity trade-off might not be the right one. And so security and content integrity being really, really paramount concerns are a part of that. Making sure that that things like the versioning system and the block system scale to large number of pages, large amounts of traffic, large number of blocks per page, with the ability to look back through history and stuff. Those are some of the areas. Read-only databases, I mean, that would certainly be really valuable. I think especially if you're looking at zero downtime migrations, the idea of a multi-master database where you switch one into read-only mode, run dev build on the other one, and then swap over and do that. That would be quite cool.
It's also a scalability thing because you can run all your read queries against like.
Oh, you're talking about a one master multi-read replica thing. Yeah. And that's that's a lot of our works there. It sort of tends to be we work very closely with the team that do our infrastructure to basically say make sure it supports the infrastructure. And I think what we've found with a lot of that is we've tended to just rely on Amazon's product offerings to sort of solve that problem for us. And it was a bit of a kind of awkward sort of thing where we put a lot of energy into making an asset abstraction system so that you could put your assets into S3. And then by the time we'd finished that, EFS came out, which was Amazon just solving the problem for us. And we're like, well, it's a lot easier to just use that. So having put all this energy into making sure we could put assets on S3, we then didn't put them on S3. And that's, I guess, a bit of the sign of how the relationship between the changing infrastructure environment and the actual code you're putting on top of that, you can't look at one without the other. What I would probably say is, I'm not like the decision to sort of sit down and get that read replica system built ourselves, I guess separate read and write databases, would be something we'd probably do when it was actually like, right, we want to do this on one of our sites. We would 100% support, pull requests in that, and happy to be discussing of like the ways in which you might be able to do that. I don't actually think it would be too hard to do basically like a database connector, which was like a decorator, which had two database connectors behind it, and ferried requests to one or the other based on whether or not it was a read query or not. So would be more than happy to kind of talk through, look, this is how you could go about and do it. But yeah, like the prioritization will probably come down to, do we actually kind of need to put this on our infrastructure? And to date, that hasn't come to the top of the list. I guess that's the environment we work in. We've got this many things that we would like to do and this much kind of time. And so we sort of get used to saying no to a lot of good ideas just to focus, but really would love to sort of help people be more able to contribute those things themselves, and recognize that just diving into a 14-year-old, hundreds of thousands of line code base is a daunting prospect for the best of us.
Thanks.
Okay, we have 2 questions left. No? Anyone?
Cool. The final thing that I'll probably just say is, while you're getting the moment, all of those kind of questions to ponder, I'm going to post them on the feature ideas forum. So I'd invite you all to kind of log onto there if you've got thoughts about those things, to contribute your ideas. This talk has been a lot of kind of like, we're not really sure how to approach this. We're wanting feedback. It's the start of a discussion and not the end of it. So, it would be great to do that. And also feel free to hit me up at the bar over the next couple of days and share your opinions one-on-one or in a small group. Do we have any more?
Any questions left to Sam? No.
Cool.
Okay, so
Thank you.
thank you very much,
Thank you.
Sam.